welcome back. Today I'm gonna be starting on your stola and not just the mock-up, the actual final garment. So, last week I went shopping, bought some fabrics. So let me show you kind of what I have. I initially thought about going for leather or faux leather because I do think the costume, like that's what it looks like it's made from in the game. But I will be wearing this in Vegas in the summer. And for those who don't know, Vegas is really, really hot. I once made a costume out of boiled wool. It looks absolutely beautiful, but like every time I wear it, I want to die because it's too hot. So I'm not making that mistake again. We're going with mostly cotton fabrics. So my first two black fabrics, this one is like a cotton linen blend. It's very simple. It's like a plain weave, but linen just has naturally a very strong texture to it. And then I have this other cotton, I think this one is just cotton or a cotton blend of sorts. The texture is just a little bit heavier on this one. So that one was definitely woven to look more textured, but it's not the fiber itself that is more textured, which is what linen is. But it looks really nice. It has just a bit of a heavier texture than the linen, and the black is also a little bit different. So it's a bit more cool while this one's a tad bit more warm. I'm hoping that once it all comes together, the slight nuances will kind of come through. I think it'll look cool while remaining fully monochromatic. Now the last one, this one is the most different of the three fabrics. This one has actually like more of an organza feel to it. So it's still very textured, but the texture is completely different and feels more almost like popcorny instead of like fibery. And it's also a lot thinner, and it's the one that has the least structure to it. So it's a lot more like flowy. And I'm hoping to use this one for a lot of the smaller gathering pieces. I'm hoping this will work out nicely. Lots of different materials, lots of different textures, lots of different colors, while remaining completely monochromatic. It's late, I'm a little delirious, but let's get the project started. I'm first starting by taking out all of my pattern pieces to prep for the cutting. I've clearly identified which pieces I plan on gathering versus which pieces I want to pleat. This is a handy reference in case I get confused and forget. I've also went ahead and thoroughly dissected which fabric I'll be using for each piece of the skirt. I use different highlighters to do so. Using my reference sheet, I'm sorting out all of my pieces by fabric to cut it out in and clearly identifying each pile. Now time to cut out all of my pieces. Alright, so I cut out all my pieces for your stola skirt. So today I'm going to start sewing. So I'm going to be primarily using, honestly, a mix of like straight stitch and overlock. Everything frays, so I'm going to make sure to overlock all my seams to make sure that the durability of the costume is on point. First of all, there's a lot of hem, especially on the bottom layer, like a lot of hem. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm probably going to be using my overlock machine to make a tiny little, like, I think they call it narrow edge hem or a baby lock. A baby lock's a very specific machine, but it's a baby lock adjacent style of stitch. I think that's honestly my best option, and I think all my hems are going to be finished that way. It's going to look finished, but also it's going to give it a bit of a ragged look, I think, overall, with everything going on the costume. So yeah, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna build one skirt at a time. I'm gonna start with the base layer just to see how it looks. Once the base layer is done, then I'm gonna actually go top down, because when it comes to the waistband, when you attach it in place, you actually want to start with the top layers and work your way down to the most base layer. Let's get the work started and see if we can finish the skirt by the end of next week. and then I can move on to the bodice. And then I can slowly move on to the accessories, which were ordered from Dangerous Ladies and are on their way. So in the meantime, let's do this. The first piece of the skirt that I'm going to prep is the largest skirt, which is the most underlayer section. It's made out of 4 skirt panels, so I'll be sewing them together at the side seams using both a straight stitch and an overlock stitch to secure it from fraying. To finish the hem, I'm doing a small and tightly rounded overlock stitch. Okay, so it's been a hot minute since I was able to work on this. So I'm not sure where I was at in terms of like what I was filming, but the last thing I did was change my mind on how I was gonna hem all the pieces. So initially I did a hefty overlock, but in hindsight I didn't really like the way it looked, so I changed it to keeping the overlocked hem, but then I turned it in by 1 centimeter and kind of top stitched that into place, and I think it just looks a bit cleaner. I do have a few pieces here that need to get a little bit of anti-fray put behind them, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that now, and that will finish everything for at least for this piece for now. To begin assembling the skirt proper, I'm going to prep my waistband. All I need to do is to make sure that all my notches are visible and to add interfacing to make it extra sturdy. Starting with layer A, my most top layer, I'm gonna prep my pieces following my reference sheet. I'm gonna mark my position on the waistband and then proceed to gather the skirt down to the length of the marked area of the waistband. I've already finished the hem for this piece with an overlock, folded it in by 1 centimeter, and top stitched it into place. We sew in place and then move on to the next piece. Layer B was done off camera but followed the same steps as layer A. For each new piece, I'll need to mark the position on the waistband. Layer C has some assemblage to do first. I gathered the lower part of the layer before pleating it into place and sewing it onto the hem of the upper layer. The finishing here is a little different. I left the hem overlocked with no top stitch. I wanted to include some variation in the finishing of each of the pieces. I still have some accents to put in, so I'm using a washable chalk to mark out the position of the bands that I want to stitch into place. I decided to make the bands from this sparkly trim along with a fabric cutout to give the band a little bit more highlight so it doesn't completely get lost in the black on black layering. I then used some leftover studs from a previous project to mimic the gems that she has on the skirt. This isn't 100% accurate, but I think it looks nice enough and it allows me to reuse some old materials I had laying around. Now that my layer C is fully done, I'm applying it to the waistband and sewing it into place. Time to move on to layer D. Layer D is also another big piece that requires a lot of assemblage first. Similarly to the previous piece, I've left the hem piece of the layer overlocked with no top stitch. I'm pleating it into the same position as the reference photo before top stitching it into place. To prevent the top part from flopping down, I've also decided to add some small stitches to tack each pleat into place. I'm also going to be adding a band in the upper center part of the pleated hem. And now we start the annoyingly long part of measuring out the placement of several small buttonholes. These buttonholes will allow me to insert my sparkly trim into the crisscross shape of Jostola's skirt. Again, here I decided to use the sparkly ribbon to help the design have a little bit more pop, given that everything is black on black. I'm stitching by hand the back of the trim to prevent it from shifting around. Now it's finally ready to be attached to the waistband. And with that, all the smaller pieces of the skirt are finally attached, and there's only the big skirt layer left to sew in place. Hello! As you can see, it's coming along really well. It probably even looks finished, but there are still some small details that I need to finish up. So the first thing is, right now underneath I have a full petticoat. In the original in-game design, her dress definitely has like a very strong V shape. Like there's actually quite a lot of volume. Most fabrics don't stick out like that. As is, the petticoat isn't quite perfect. As you can see, it's too long and it's peeking out from under the dress, and I don't want that. So I'm gonna go and put in as much length as possible, but without it actually like being visible. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to take my corset and probably, instead of just cutting it, because there's a nice little wire here at the bottom of at the hem of the petticoat, which I like, I'm gonna probably just kind of do a sewing piece to pull it up. So that's that. Now other pieces of the costume, I finished the hem with an overlock. I'm afraid this is not strong enough or secure enough. So what I would like to add to those hems is a little bit of no fray, which is a type of liquid that you use when you don't want to finish a hem. You can put that and it prevents it from fraying. I'm going to do a few tests to make sure that it dries clear, and if it doesn't, to try to keep it really just on that stitch. But I'm gonna go ahead and add that everywhere where I want to reinforce the hem of that piece. Last but not least, the back is fully done, the zipper is in, but I don't have a snap. So I have to come in and sew a little hook and eye and a little snap at the back. But that's where I'm at. It's almost done. So I'm gonna go ahead, finish all that, and jump straight to the reveal. So today is going to be the last day of me working on this skirt. It's already taking a bit longer than I anticipated, but that's because I had finished it, and I remembered that she has these weird little braids like throughout the skirt part. Initially, I was really set on not wanting to make buttonholes and kind of slide them through the buttonholes, because it really does take forever to do that, especially like due to the sheer amount of buttonholes I would need to put. And I was determined not to do that. But I couldn't find another way that looked nice on the skirt. So lo and behold, I did end up doing a bunch of buttonholes. So I positioned where each and every single one of my braids would go, and then I essentially inserted all of my, it's not a ribbon, it's not a bias tape either, it's like a cord of sorts. So that's what I ended up using. So I inserted that in the holes and then ironed everything into place. And it took forever. Like, not forever, but the buttonholes alone took 3 hours to put in. It brought me no pleasure to do that. I did not want to do that, but it was the best result, so I did it anyways. So I still have some cord to put in now, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that and finish up the placement and all the ironing, and then it will officially be done. And there you have it, folks. The skirt is officially done. This took me much longer than planned, but I'm really happy with the final results of the garment. I'm also really excited to move on to the bodice, which will be the next piece that I'll be working on. And yes, I will be filming the process and sharing it here on YouTube. So if you'd like to see more of this kind of content, then make sure to give it a big thumbs up and to subscribe. You can also support me on Ko-fi if you want, or check out my socials, which will all be linked in the description box below. And I think that's all I have for today. So goodbye, and hopefully I'll be seeing you again in the next one.